There's 8 of us. Four. All right, good morning, everybody. We are gonna get started. It is 7:32. Do we have any, good morning and nice to see you all. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda? No,
I don't, other than just noting that we have 2 4s.
some days are like that.
Yep.
So we will move on, to public comment. Wait for everybody to get settled here.
I'm here, Amy.
Okay, Kim, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, I recommend John Moore to be general manager for GMT. And I've been in contact with the Vermont Human Rights Consumer Clayton discredited me because of my disability. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Kim. Any other public comment? All right, we will move on to the consent agenda, which includes the December 16th minutes, the January 6th minutes, and the check register. And before anybody makes a motion, I just want to say that I thought I caught an error in the minutes because I in the December 16th minutes thanked Catherine. And I was like, no, I thanked Bob and Catherine. Well, apparently I was not good at my job and I only thanked Catherine. So although the minutes are accurate, I do want to say that I am so grateful for all Bob did on this board for so many years, with his thoughtfulness and kindness and expertise that he brought. So although the minutes won't reflect it because I didn't say it then, I'm saying it now.
I'll move we accept the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, thanks, Andrea. Yep, I have glasses on, glasses off. Any further comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Or abstentions? All right, we are moving forward. So we are going to move on to the FY27 budget, which we've seen peaks of presentations. It went out to public comment, and Nick is coming to the table. He is going to share his wisdom with us.
I'm just back seeking final approval of the budget. Again, this is our proposed, so we will come back in the fall with the adjusted version after we negotiate the state grant agreements. We did have a public budget meeting. It was, comparison to history, I guess, fairly well attended. Not a significant amount of comments on the budget, more on service. We did a combined planning and budget meeting. The minutes for that are attached. I believe my memo starts on page 13, so you can reference that. I did include some of the previous documents as well as the public budget meeting presentation that I gave. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We haven't made any changes to the budget since it was brought to you. So it's the exact same version that we saw last month.
Go ahead.
I'd just like to commend Nick. I thought the presentation put together was really excellent, had more information than I think we usually get. And I see that he had pulled out the impact of the transfer. So that was very clear in what he presented. So I thought that was all excellent. So if it's appropriate, I'll make a motion that we move the 27 operating budget totaling $20,985,156.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Tasha. Any further discussion? Chapin, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, everything what Paul said is true. And I think just we need to make public that the financials are a challenge and that we will be continuing to look for other sources of funding to sustain the level of service we currently are providing. But that we are in the midst of a fiscal structural gap here, and it will require all of our help and our partners' help to figure out how to develop a sustainable structure moving forward. And I look forward to that conversation.
All said. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? Abstaining? All right. The
You know,
FY 27.
Amy, during my life, I sung in a lot of choirs and glee clubs and so on. And one thing about those is you have direction. And the eyes that we put forward have no direction. There should be one beat, I. That should be it. Don't string out. It's for a minute. One beat.
Our eyes need to be more instinct and more
I
musical.
have somebody doing the lead. Paul, do you want to volunteer to be our conductor?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, moving on.
And I just want to apologize for my complete inability to guess what will take time and what won't take time at our meetings, because we finished that topic before we were even scheduled to start it. And so we're gonna be way ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we've had the opportunity to discuss it. The public comment didn't shed new light that would cause us to change it, although they brought up comments that are important and things that we've talked about. And we'll have other opportunities to talk about budget adjustments to meet changing needs. So yeah, thanks for bringing it back a couple times. And so now we will toss it over to the UPWP grant application. We've touched on a little bit, but you have more in depth today. Chris, good morning, welcome.
Good morning. In the pack, I sent out a revised version this morning that just had a couple of capital project items that were omitted, but everything else predominantly stayed the same from what was sent out on Friday. And so just as a reminder, the UPWP is the Unified Planning Work Program, and it's a major source of funding for planning projects here in Chittenden County. And for GMT, it is a 10% local match, so a really good opportunity to draw down federal dollars for the work outlined. And so, again, just to recap from the last meeting, that the application is due this Friday, and we're looking for a motion today from the board to accept the application. We'll send it to CCRPC, and then it will be reviewed by the UPWP committee, FHWA staff, the CCRPC board, and CCRPC staff. So there's many iterations of review of this particular document, and we'll work with those different partners depending on if anything needs to change based on eligibility or other similar items. And so there's 6 overarching categories in the UPWP, which is essentially the work plan for the planning department, and then also help support the work plans for other departments as well. And so there's a service planning section, a capital project section, the National Transit Database. So that's a lot of the federal monthly and yearly reporting that we do, rider experience, outreach and public engagement, additional planning projects, and then professional development funding as well. And so the 3 major themes that I wanted to highlight from the application are, it's really focusing on our newfound urban only mission for FY 27. And so many of the items are a continuation of either what we've currently done or, different projects that we need to do. Part of the motto is we're doing a little bit less better. And I think part of this document really helps speak to that, of doing a lot of the things that we should be doing in an urban only system. The other major theme really is around sort of this data-driven both service planning and data-driven capital projects planning process. So that also is sort of a theme throughout the entire document. And then, you saw a little bit of a glimpse of that at the last board meeting with some of the fare and ridership data that we presented. So that sort of speaks to some of that moving forward. And then really a third theme is a better connection to regional and local planning. So I know we have planning staff here. We have a lot of documents around the county and our local municipalities that talk about what GMT should or shouldn't do. And I think one example that I wanted to highlight is the CCRPC has not adopted it yet, but they have a transportation options plan, which is essentially a TDM implementation plan And that really takes in a lot of the work that the towns and the region are working on. And so I think, I see a lot of the work around the Rider Experience Committee that Jamie's team is working on, or a lot of the TDM policy work that we're doing fits in with what a lot of these documents say you should do and trying to actually implement these various plans that exist on various bookshelves or in computers, I guess. And so diving into the specific categories, we have the first one, which is the service planning category, and that really covers a lot of the route analysis and planning, a lot of the data management that, again, you saw at the last board meeting, creation of the schedules with our operations and scheduling committee team, and then also for funding many of the softwares that help us do all of that work. As part of this, we're also looking to update the transit development plan. And so GMT last did a formal TDP grab it off my bookshelf, in 2010, back in the CCTA days. So this is what the document looked like before. We're hoping to have a much slimmer but more streamlined version of it, and working on that in this upcoming fiscal year. And what it really does is helps look at all of our existing transit services as they are. Really is an opportunity to look at where travel demand is going and see how our services can sort of match where folks are going in 2027 and beyond. Oh, and then really, I think with the vision committee work starting pretty soon that Susan is leading up, that's happening in this fiscal year. The work on that TDP document is going to start until sometime in FY27. And I think that will be a good segue as the vision committee sort of gets going and some of the conversations lead to more of the service conversation. That's where I think a lot of that effort would go into that particular document. Next, in the capital project section, one of the things that I added in there is really a lot of the work of implementing the $6+ million that GMT was awarded from the 5339 grant application. So a lot of those are the things that were in there that staff is going to have to work on to implement over the next year. The capital project section also includes work on the implementation of the automatic passenger counters as well as automatic stop annunciators. And then also it is helping fund, we've had this internal shelter and amenity committee over the past year. And one of the things that the group discussed is doing a sort of quarter level assessment of our bus stop amenities. And so I see this similar to towns and municipalities do like a sidewalk or paving plan where you can see, okay, they're working on these 5 streets in this fiscal year and the next 5 streets in the next fiscal year. What this will do is I think help us better understand what amenities we want and help us be more shovel ready for grants, but also help be more transparent for the public. We might not be able to get to maintaining or fixing that thing in this year, but it's on the schedule to be part of a future fiscal year. And I think that will just help provide more transparency for that process. And then finally in there was a facility maintenance plan, which would tie into sort of a long range capital plan as well. That really ties in some of the existing documents we have, such as the transit asset management or the 5-year capital plan, but really have a more developed version of that. The other category is the rider experience and outreach. This really is Jamie's team is starting the outreach on building that committee. And so part of the UPWP funding will help fund a lot of the work for that committee. And then we're also looking to, we do a lot of service planning related things and really trying to boost the average for that. So some of that will also help fund, making folks more aware of opportunities to provide comment and interact with the public. And then finally, in the additional planning projects, it's going through a lot of similar things that we've gone through in the past. But one thing that I really wanted to highlight was the DTC operational assessment. And so we're hoping to look with a consultant to evaluate the future of the downtown transit center amid sort of the changing development that's happening around it. You have the City Place development to the south. You have the former church to the west that was demolished and the former state office building to the east. A lot of potential development that's happening in and around a very busy transit center. And so we really want the consultant to help us look at sort of the operational needs of GMT, what those developments might happen and how they might impact our operations. And really, there's kind of two pathways. One is, do we change the way we operate in downtown Burlington as a result of this study? And working with the city of Burlington, working with other municipalities and the nearby developers? Or do we really double down on the transit center and figure out what we need to do to make it a good place for operations as well as for riders? And then the last is just the professional development funding as well in there. So that's it.
Thank you for all your work. A couple of quick questions. How does this total compare with prior years? I think you said that it was a.
Right. Oh yeah. So one thing that I forgot to mention in sort of the overarching themes is this total is around 900,000. Last year was in the 750, I think.
Okay.
So it's progressively increased over the years. Part of this year's focus really is, as we're shifting to this urban focus, we were really trying to identify what are some of that increase is related to shifting expenses that were absorbed by the rural sort of operations and funding into planning related items that are going to be an urban only focus.
Okay.
So some of that's a shift of staff time and a shift of direct expenses that are going into that.
And the source of the match for that, if there is a match?
The local money that comes in from all the members.
So it's the local
Assessments.
assessments. Okay. And then I guess my last question, and thank you for all the content, it's detailed, might be for either Eliana or Marshall, but what's your initial sense of the availability of the funds? Obviously you don't know until everybody's applied, but yeah.
I'll let Marshall take that one if he's available.
Hey, thanks for the question, Paul. That's a good question. We haven't met with FHWA yet to determine our funding allocation, but I expect it will be similar to last year.
And historically, one of the biggest barriers for GMT has been our local match piece of it, but I think that's been, that may change with federal related stuff, but I think.
Especially with this a 10% federal match, it makes it a great deal for us.
Okay. And then, sorry, last question. Marshall, am I correct that at the federal level, the whole FHWA is up for reauthorization this year?
That's correct.
Okay, so whatever, it's a big unknown, like all the other unknowns, but different, for a future year. So as we think about how we're expending these funds, it may or may not exist in the same form 12 months from now.
And so Marshall, to sort of follow up on that question, would the fiscal year 27 UPWP be paid for out of the existing surface transportation bill or the one that will replace it?
That's another great question. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll be paid for by the current surface transportation bill so that depending on what happens with its renewal won't impact this.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, I was curious, it's a great list, and is it a ranked list? Is one of my questions, and then my other question is, some of the request is to fund existing staff and programs, and some of it is to fund consultants, is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And so it's not ranked, it's intentionally specific and vague at the same time to provide some level of flexibility. Things change every month, 2 months, so.
Yeah, I was gonna make an aside, but it's irrelevant. Andrea.
Yeah, I think I have a somewhat related question, but is this like a yes, no? Will we get a yes, no approval on this? Is there a world in which we get a smaller pot of funding from what we asked for? And how do we is there a sense of like which things we prioritize in the case where we get a smaller funding pot?
I think, certainly this is what we're asking for, and part of it, we're working with the RPC on some of the, and FHWA on sort of the eligibility of some of the stuff that we've outlined in there. And so, yeah, I think we can certainly come back to what things, once we hear from them, it's a multi-month process, so we're still a couple months away of even knowing what things might have to get trimmed from it. And so I'm happy to come back and discuss more.
And that's what happens with a negotiation with CCRPC as opposed to just getting the letter from them with the results.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Hopeful, everyone's hopeful but cautious.
And I'll be able to keep updates. I have a non-voting seat on the UPWP committee for GMT, and so we'll be up to date on what is going on with that as it progresses.
Remind me, is there a motion, is there an action needed as part of this one?
Yes,
There is.
and there's a suggested motion in the read ahead I sent yesterday.
I will move that we approve the FY27 UPWP funding request of 934,900 or 293. Cannot read numbers this early in the morning.
We have a second? Second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
It's better.
Feel judged now. Any nays? Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Motion passed. Good luck getting it through.
I do think that we want to make sure that we recognize what our vice chair just said about the inappropriateness of this meeting time.
That did not occur. We will move on from that statement. Just like my comments about Bob apparently didn't occur either. All right, we are gonna move on to discussion. There's been a lot of conversation about O&D in the past several months, from learning of its budget shortfall fast arriving to outreach to our municipalities and lots of negotiations. And so we're gonna get a tip of the iceberg summary today, but it's been a busy one, especially for Clayton and staff.
So thank you. And so I was going to start with the bottom line up front, which is that the sort of controversy on this issue, I think, is been largely resolved. I think Caleb Grant said it best in House Transportation Committee last week when he said that when you look at things like the O&D program and having to manage it within the available appropriation, it's essentially, you know, picking which finger is least critical to you to lop off. It's that they're all important, but it's going to be painful. And so, so just a recap of how we got to this point. What we saw in the beginning of the year was that statewide, because of the funding challenges that we have as a state, not as a GMT, there needed to be a reduction in the overall O&D appropriation. And so when you look at the three areas that we operated the O&D program, our initial amounts that we got, that we received, were 100,000 less. And so we have that to start the year, and then we also have a spike of about 24% of an increase in demand. And so not surprisingly, when you have both a decrease in funding and a spike in demand, we were burning through our funds way faster than projected, to the point that in November we were really concerned that we were going to be unable to have the program complete its most highest prioritization rides through the entire year. So these are rides to dialysis, to chemo treatment, to adult day, to food access. And so we were very fortunate that in December, VTrans gave us additional funds, brought the appropriation actually above the previous year's level. And this is where I'll say, when I look back at my own work on this, I think that as soon as we got the additional funds from VTrans, we probably should have slowed this process down. And but I think that we were still of the mindset that we needed to act as quickly as possible to preserve the critical rides. And so as we approach the time frame where the ride restrictions that we proposed would be implemented, we had a request from Colchester to extend the deadline, which or extend when the restrictions would be in place, which we have done. And now that has been pushed to February 23rd. And so we will be meeting with the O&D committee next week. And at that meeting, what we are going to hear from folks is that they will, all of our trip restrictions now will be voluntary for the partners. And they will have the choice of implementing the trip restrictions, and the incentive to do so is that GMT will then guarantee that critical access trips, and we're defining those as dialysis, chemo treatments, adult day, and food access, that those would be guaranteed through the end of the fiscal year for those communities. We think that if the trip restrictions are put in place, that this guarantee will not harm us significantly financially. Our projections are that if we did have to use some of our reserves, that they would be minimal, and that we would still be able to reach our targets for the reserve fund and its transfer to RCT and to TVT. One of the things that what made negotiation with Colchester a bit different is that they are using the program for vocational trips, and which is sort of unusual across the program. And in fact, I believe that they do a majority of the vocational trips in the program statewide, just from their community. And so vocational trips being a lower priority, Colchester was concerned that they have 9 individuals that currently use the service to get back and forth to work, and that if we were not allowing those trips, that there would be an impact. And so one of the things that we did is we partnered with SSTA, as we always do. Tim has done an amazing job with all of the projections and getting us through this crisis. And so what we determined is that the amount to provide this vocational service would be $34,000 for the from the period of time when the trip restrictions would go into place on February 23rd through the end of the year. And we communicated to this to Colchester, and they have committed, at least verbally so far, to providing an additional $34,000. They have a preference to have their local match be spread across all of the trip types, so that instead of them paying 100% of the cost of the vocational trips, that we would adjust the local match so that all of their O&D trips would be a split between some local and state and federal match. This won't impact the overall amount that they receive. And what it will likely mean is that their match for their trips, instead of being the normal 20%, will be, and I'm just pulling this figure out of the air as an example, but instead it would be 30%. And so again, the amount that we contribute will end up being the same, and I think that then helps them with their local political situation, with demonstrating that that those vocational trips are still, a split of local and state and federal dollars. So we're going to hear from this morning at the Senate Transportation Committee. The Town of Colchester Manager Aaron Frank is going to talk about the topic. I think that it will be a more relaxed discussion than it was last week when it was in front of House Transportation. And I suspect that when I go and testify, we're going to be in alignment with the Town of Colchester, and essentially using this as an opportunity to demonstrate that this is what fiscal scarcity happening does. And that this is really a symptom, or the root cause of this is the lack of funding that's available for public transit, especially in light of the T-bills dwindling resources. And I think it's giving us a preview of what is to expect with public transit in the future if it continues to be financially challenged. That this is going to be leading to conflict where two organizations that are trying to do good will be in conflict with each other because of different visions of what that good looks like. So happy to open it up to questions. Really have to express sincere appreciation to Tim here, who has been having this, it seems like his full-time gig for a while, has been working on O&D. Certainly want to thank our partners at CCRPC with going on this journey with us and navigating the difficult circumstances. And a thank you to all of our partners who have worked to figure out how to respond to this. I can say that the town of Colchester will not be the only partner that will be contributing extra funds. I was extremely proud of Williston, who also is going to be providing additional funds so that they can add trips above our trip restrictions. So that's something I should have mentioned, is that the partners that implement the trip restrictions can pay for the cost of additional trips above that. So they do have the option of adding trips. And the town of Williston chose to do that because they wanted to fund social trips for their residents. So any questions, and happy to respond to the fluid situation as best I can.
So it sounds like you've done a really amazing job of working your way through a difficult situation. And kudos to all of the staff. I have a big picture question, so if someone else has a pointed question, I'm happy to wait, but since there's some time, I was wondering if you could put the O&D program into the context of just general SSTA service that every community has. And maybe even the shopping specials, because the shopper special I see is part of the O&D program. So just trying to get a picture of how the organization provides.
And so I'm going to provide some overviews. I will probably phone a friend with Tim and maybe answering some other questions if they get more detailed. One of the things that we are very lucky about is that Tim had a hand in writing the O&D manual when he was at VTrans, and so now we have that in-house sort of expertise. And so the O&D program is a rural program. And that's the reason why when we finish our rural transfer, rural community transportation will end up taking over this on July 1st. And the way it fits in with the system at SSTA is that they offer our paratransit service for the areas that we have our fixed route transit. And the O&D is looking generally at areas that we don't have fixed route transit. SSTA then also does our non-emergency medical transportation, or our Medicaid, and this is where in Chittenden County you see sort of the braided model. The one thing that makes Chittenden County a bit different when it comes to the other counties with the braiding is that Gesundheit is that is the fixed route system is not also braided within the same organization, where like at RCT they do the fixed route as well as everything else. We're specialized at GMT Urban for the fixed route. And so the thing there is that The O and D program, you sort of see usage the further away you get from our city center where we have the dense, the population. One of I believe that Agewell is, well, I know that they're our biggest partner and Tim, are they about half of the overall or?
They're not, but
Okay.
they are, between them and Colchester, they're the two largest
Yeah.
that get federal funds from.
Yeah.
from
And-
us.
And so the thing that's nice about Agewell is that then they are sort of a catch-all, so that, for example, it was brought up in House Transportation Committee. Where Phil Pouch, one of our former board members here, was like, hey, well, how come Heinsberg isn't, like an O and D partner? And the reason why is because they get their service through Agewell. And, so am I answering your question or am I just randomly veering around O and D like a pinball?
So throughout Chittenden County, there are all the same services or different services or?
Each partner, sort of offers their own menu of services. And so I think that that's one of the things that is creating consternation with this situation is that, so for example, like Colchester, they've identified that, that they have a real need of getting people to work, that, and they're thinking that there's not enough density for fixed route. And so this is how they will address that, where other partners haven't really focused on vocational trips. And so Tim,
So just to add some more context, so there's different federal awards by O and D partner. Some have very small budgets, like Cathedral Square has a budget of, under $1,000. But they have very, limited trips that they provide. Same thing with, the family center in Burlington, which is through Parks and Rec. They have a very small budget, so they'll do like.
Tim, can I interrupt you
Yeah.
and invite you to come to the table?
Yeah, sure.
You're far from the,
Yeah.
I don't know if others can hear, and I see
Yeah.
Chapin leaning in. Maybe.
So-
Can you give a big picture, like how do we provide service to people who are not fixed routes between O and D and other providers? And then is O and D always going through GMT or can different providers apply for it separately?
So the answer to, we have the ADA, as Clayton mentioned, if you're within 3/4 of a mile of the fixed route. You may qualify the ADA transportation services. There is an application process that you have to go through.
And that's for every type of rider or just the? Okay,
and so that it doesn't matter whether they're using it for medical appointment, shopping, whatever. If for ADA, they have a disability that prevents them from using fixed route transit. And they're within 3/4 of a mile of the route.
thank you.
Yeah, but they have to apply for that. So, if there's a situation where, as Clayton mentioned, someone's not within the fixed route, then it's like a dial ride service. So you would call SSTA, the call center staff, they'll crunch all the information for you and determine whether or not you qualify for O and D. Sometimes folks, have Medicaid as well, but Medicaid only covers, medical transportation trips, that NEMT, non-emergency medical transportation. So, but some folks will have a combination of Medicaid eligible trips that they'll get, as well as the O and D program. So each town at the beginning of the fiscal year, I develop a local agreement with each town based on historical data from previous years on how much money they'll get in their federal grant award. And as I already mentioned, some of them have very small budgets and they're aware of that. And oftentimes if they exceed their budget, they'll either just say, okay, that's all the rides we can provide for the year, or they might do some at 100% of their own money to cover more rides. So, The trip purposes as defined in the O and D manual are, as Clayton already mentioned, they're kind of prioritized. The critical care comes first. Adult day is pretty much considered one more critical type of transportation services. And then you get into the ones that are not as critical, like social personal trips, and the work-related trips. Now, in Colchester's situation, why there's such a big impact on Colchester is that, 31% of the trips that they've provided, and FY26 to date are, vocational work related transportation trips. Another 29% of the trips that they've provided to date, in fiscal year 26 are social personal. So 60% of the transportation that they're doing is these less critical transportation trips. And that's kind of why they're in the situation that they are with the decreased funding that we got from V-Trans at the beginning of the fiscal year. Now, on the flip side of that, Agewell countywide in Chittenden County, they also have a program in Franklin Granite Isle as well, but focusing on Chittenden County, 77% of the trips that they're doing are medical related. And they've seen a significant increase in ride volumes. Trip costs have gone up slightly. But in their case, we gave them an additional $100,000. We gave them $80,000 federal, and they agreed with working with me to a 20% local match, which is the $20,000. And that's going to help them get through the rest of the year, because a large portion of their trips are these medical related trips. Richmond we're still waiting to hear back from Richmond. That's one of the last few, but I think they've got a special meeting with their select board to approve that budget that I proposed, which is giving them additional federal dollars, and then they just have to get approval from the select board for the associated 20% cash match. Williston, as Clayton mentioned, they did a great job. We crunched a lot of numbers with Williston, a lot of back and forth, which was great, because then they were well educated when they went in front of the select board. They actually drafted a beautiful letter that went to the select board. So they're in pretty good shape now. 3 of them have already been sent to local agreements. Colchester has signed theirs. Williston, I haven't seen that yet, but I'm pretty confident they're going to sign theirs as well as Agewell. Those have all gone out.
So let me interrupt for a second. Do you have a follow-up question? I know Paul has a question, but your expression says there's something I want to clarify.
Well, no, I'm trying to move out to the big picture versus the program, but that's okay. I think a lot of other people ask questions.
The thing that struck me going through this process, even though I've been sitting at this table for a while, it's extremely complicated, but this one is funky in that we are somewhat of a pass-through to SSTA and a kind of a go-between, and there's a committee made of the municipalities and partners and CCRPC, sorry. And they're somewhat influencers or decision makers of this pass-through funding that's somehow our responsibility. And there's just this weird, funky relationship for this particular pot of funding that makes this particularly complicated, unlike some of the other things that are more within our control.
We're the federal subrecipient. GMT is of V-Trans. So it's 5311 monies that was awarded by V-Trans in our grant application process. We submit a grant application every year. I put that together. And they say, it's not looking very good. Don't get too aggressive with your request. And, we asked for level funding from what we got the previous year, although we knew historically in FY25 that we had spent a lot more than that in the program. But Nick and I were able to work together because we had some underspent funds on the rural side of the O&D program that we were able to use to support Chittenden for their expenditures from last year, as well as some discretionary funds that we had under another program that no longer exists. But we're the federal subrecipient, so the money flows through our grant agreement, and then we take that and we allocate it historically, as I mentioned, by all the O&D partners within Chittenden County, FGI, as well as Washington County.
So staying at the structural level, not individual grants.
Yeah.
How is it that the partners exist? Like, why is it that the town of Williston exists as a partner, but not the town of Essex as or whatever? How do the partners exist?
So that's developed over many, many, many years. It existed before I even worked at V-Trans. That they established what those O&D partners were going to be,
And so is there
Who's
a
they?
different kind of
well,
service,
I
different
can,
towns?
there's.
No, who's they established?
So I think V-Trans working with GMT way back when.
Okay.
And as well as, you know, the towns, age well. So the town would have to make a commitment to the 20% cash match if they wanted to be an O&D partner. There's nothing saying that new O&D partners couldn't be established. It's gonna be a little difficult facing the budget challenges we have now. But, you know, we have added partners historically over the years to join the program if they're willing to kick in the 20% cash match.
So is the service a similar service in each community provided by different entities, or is it a totally different service in different places?
Totally different service by O&D partner.
Okay.
One entity is the service provider.
Right, but like the town of Williston only provides in the town of Williston, for example, they're not providing for.
Providing for residents of Williston.
Right,
Yes,
right,
correct.
so it's not,
Yes.
but like Agewell is providing for Milton where the same service as the town of Williston is providing for Williston, and it's totally different things.
Agewell countywide will provide trips within other towns.
Okay,
Within their budget, like for an example, Winooski has decided they no longer want to be an O&D partner. So as of FY 27, they will not be an O&D partner anymore. But Agewell countywide will pick up some of those rides for their residents.
this year we're the pass-through, next year we are no longer the pass-through, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then
Correct.
SSTA serves both the O&D program, but also the ADA program.
Correct.
So they, as a provider, are providing two different things, right?
Yes,
So those are
correct.
two totally different subject areas, buckets, they just happen to have the same provider for a portion of it.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that is helpful to understand.
Yeah, we basically subcontract, GMT subcontracts our ADA complementary paratransit with SSTA.
And you may have the same rider receiving all three programs.
Right, understood. The match, structurally, the match was what I was going after. Okay.
Does the fact that Essex has their own buses impact whether they want to be involved in the O&D program?
Sure. Yeah,
They provide most of those services themselves.
yeah.
For the same price-ish? Does anyone know? I'm just curious.
What was the question?
Is it the same, we're talking about 9 people in Colchester for $34,000. Is that, there's an efficiency question there that I wonder how best to provide the service, and that's not something that we get to debate at this moment, but.
Sorry, one more question. So I know in South Burlington, the O&D covers the shopper special. So once it goes away from being a GMT pass-through program, will GMT still be operating the shopper special?
I would say yes. We've had discussions with V-Trans on this, on how to fund that going forward as well.
And this is what, like a $6,000?
20,000 a year
Oh,
at
20.
100%. It's about 16,000 federal a year.
Dan made a commitment to fund that through.
Okay.
funding different
That's what I thought.
sources.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Raj, I see your hand up.
Yeah, good morning. I'm curious, so this won't be a pass-through for GMT, and I'm sure this has been discussed, I just don't know it, next year. So how will this funding flow in the next fiscal year? And just a comment about Essex, my limited knowledge on Essex is I can't comment on the same dollar amount, but their service times and their service availability is far more limited than I think this program provides. But I think Paul could probably speak better to that.
So, Raj, Rural Community Transportation, RCT, will be taking over our responsibilities for the O&D program. And so that's the organization that just took over our Franklin Grand Isle service.
Kind of what I assumed. Thank you.
And this is all the stuff that is mind-blowingly hard to not only understand even after years of sitting here, but also explain to the public and to lawmakers about how complicated these systems are. So I really, really appreciate the work that Tim, you and Clayton have done, both internally with partners and at the legislature to kind of explain this and keep it afloat.
And in years past, just for additional clarity, we've been able to work with VTrans based on how our expenditures are doing. And they've given us additional federal money at mid-year to cover any shortfalls. We also work within the committees. So let's say we get, 3/4 of the way through the year and we're looking at the financials for all the O&D partners within that committee, whether that's Franklin Grand Isle, Washington County, or Chittenden County. And one partner will say, yeah, I've got some extra federal money that I can give to a different partner so they can cover their shortfall for the remainder of the year. So some of those things have been done pretty regularly every year. But now we're in a different situation where there just isn't that much extra discretionary funds at VTrans level to stay in that.
Yeah, one of the reasons why this has never come up to the board level is because it's operated, we've been able to meet needs, we've been able to be
Yes.
flexible, and there had always been other sort of pools of money that we could tap into to prevent having to have elimination of services. And so that's what makes, it unique this year is that we don't.
And as Clayton mentioned, thanks to VTrans, they did give us a significant amount of money to address this shortfall.
Also, I see your hand, but Paul was gonna go
Well, I
first.
was just gonna say, in 3 years, Clayton has stuck this all up like a sponge.
Paul's got off the rails today.
Well, that was actually part of the problem was that it's never been on fire, which means that I've never actually paid attention to it. So it did take a lot of learning, quick.
Austin, go for it, please.
Yeah, sorry for having the camera off today, folks. I guess my question is 2 parts. I mean, one, has this process identified structural changes we need to make to the governance of this program? And 2, what are the next steps to do that? I mean, is this a learning experience so we can make the governance and the operations of this and the SOPs of this such that we don't have this problem again?
That's an excellent question. I'm actually gonna turn to Dan because he has him and Ross do have some ideas on going forward.
But
Yeah.
we're not responsible after this fiscal year, right? So there are lots of things, but it won't be this board. Okay, I just want to make sure we're allocating our time well to.
Yeah.
Thank
That
you.
was me nodding my head to Paul's question. I think you guys could see me, but I was vigorously nodding my head.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Great question, Austin. So just to bring one more very high level, fact to this, as the O&D program, as it's currently funded, and guidance for VTrans, actually includes a lot of money from the Federal Highway Administration that's flexed over to public transit. The actual money that we get from the Federal Transit Administration for this program actually doesn't even cover the capital we need to actually operate it. And so VTrans, which is not usual across the nation, actually puts our own money in to actually provide trips as well, as opposed to just capital. Just to, in case you go researching this program somewhere else, you'll see it listed as a 5310, and it's like, oh, they only buy capital. Where we're going in the future, we're not looking to change the overall program, guidance or the structure of the committees. The money is still capped though, right? Even if we can bring the $6 million to fiscal year 27, we're still going to have a constrained program in Vermont. And so we still will have to implement some type of trip capping across the state. Again, that's not the provider level, right? So that's the SSTA working with RCT, who's working with their partners on the local match. Across the state, most of the transit agencies, get the budget, they meet with the partners, they set the levels, and then they work with inside the constraints, and VTrans reserves a small amount of money, like $100,000 is usually what we set aside to help to actually pay for trips above and beyond at the end of the fiscal year. So, some things that we know we'll have to be more cautious of going into fiscal year 27 is like, what do we do about vocational trips? We know they can't be a high priority, but it's not like we want to say no to them if they're critical. And so, and I mean critical in that suddenly a partner who is providing a trip for someone that rider's car dies and they need a ride to job for like 2 weeks. What does that look like? How does VTrans come forward with the money to help cover that trip? We're still talking about that, right? And also social personal. What type of, do we need to suggest some trip capping at social personal, right? And just provide some guardrails for the partners to consider in conversations. Most agencies, they don't even offer the type of level of social personal vocational that you're seeing in Chittenden County, right? Like RCT, they're doing 2 social personal for the month, and that is it. So, I mean, we're talking like, there's a lot of like heavy, constraints in place across the state already. I think we're just looking to, set a tone that is equal across the state and not have a, one community doing too much of one type of trip that causes a buck in the trend compared to everyone else. That's one thing that I think VTrans is really heading down for our guidance. So hope that helped. Yeah.
Thank you. And it was really luxurious to take this time to really kind of ask those questions, those fundamental questions, to really try to understand this program. So thank you, Tim and Clayton, for kind of pondering it with us. And Dan, while you're talking, why don't we move right over to your route performance report? That's okay.
Happy to do it. And actually, I couldn't unmute myself at the time that you were talking about the UPWP, but I just want to make one small reference for that before I get started. We do VTrans, Federal Transit Administration gives VTrans planning money that we give to Chittenden County Regional Commission in the tune of $600,000. It looked like the number that I'm seeing in my budget. And so I just want to mention it that GMT should at least be committed to at least that level of funding on your planning budget. And so, and sorry, I couldn't unmute at the time that you guys were talking about that agenda item. So,
thank you.
Yeah. And I believe Ross is actually working on that particular flex. He was supposed to be working on it today. Okay. Thank you for this moment to bring forward the presentation on Green Mountain Transit's 2025 route performance report. And so if you haven't seen the full version of this, let me know. I can make sure it gets out to you. It'll be posted on VTrans's website very soon. And so if, and in case you don't remember, this is like our 10, 15, that's some type of year of actually having this route performance report presented. Let's start off by talking about some just high level overview stuff from VTrans, right? And so, if you were to read the 15 pages of the route performance report, what would you want to glean from it? You'd want to glean these facts, right? Ridership, we provided just under 4.5 million trips in fiscal year 25, which is a 3% decrease. And so, and I'll talk a little bit about where that decrease occurred. Our cost per passenger, because we had a decrease in ridership, our costs per passenger went up slightly. So we're at $15.69 per passenger. So that's the average cost across the entire state. And that is a 7% increase over last year. Vermont relies heavily on volunteer drivers to deliver a lot of our demand response trips, right? We're talking about 40% of all demand response trips are being provided by volunteers in Vermont and not a paid driver, right? And so they are getting reimbursed their mileage, and that is it. And that number, if we're going to sustain the level of service that we're providing today, especially in light of all of our conversations about the O&D program, we really need to increase that volunteer driver pool. We had about 300 volunteer drivers before the COVID pandemic occurred. And so it'd be great to get back to that level. And so, and it's really important to note that in fiscal year 25 and into 26, we made service reductions across the state. GMT, you had $2 million in service reductions that you pushed forward. On the rural side, VTrans advocated for $1.6 million in service cuts on the rural side. So there's going to be a lot of charts and graphs. So if anyone has questions about those, please let me know. So as I mentioned, just under 4.5 million trips provided in 2025, a decrease again. The decrease that we saw, I mean, we did, because we reduced transit service, by $2 million of service in GMT urban and $1.6 million of service in other parts of the rural service, that really is what drove this decrease in ridership. And so is what we were seeing. And so ultimately, will this stabilize? I don't know. But we are hopeful that in 26, where we're not seeing as much service cuts, that we will see a stabilization and that 4.5 or more trips we'll see in 26. Well, the statewide operating costs, we're at $70 million to operate the statewide service. That's all in, right? All costs, right? That's the Medicaid program, that's our O&D program, that's the urban service and the rural service all together. Cost us $70 million in Vermont. And that cost per trip, is $15.69 per trip. And you can kind of see the growth over time. That 2021, that was right in the middle of the pandemic when we were providing a lot more service for very low ridership. VTrans, we love to go back and look historically at transit rates. That's one of our benchmarks that we rely heavily on to understand the trends in vehicle hours. So this is a cost per vehicle hour. So every time one vehicle is on the road for 1 hour, this is the cost that has been averaged across the entire year. You can see fiscal year 24. And then you can see how it compares to fiscal year 25. There are some, ups and downs, right? Transit rates are, fluctuate, right? In GMT urban and rural, you're at the bottom there, right? So on the GMT urban side, you can see that you had, an increase in fiscal year 25 of your transit rates, but you saw a decrease on the rural side, right? And so, it's very dynamic year to year. It depends on how much service you provide, how many hours you're on the road. And so it's really a number that's calculated based on, all that service on the road. And so we do expect in fiscal year 26, as we, so the numbers are going to be harder to calculate in fiscal year 26 because, Franklin Grand Isle left GMT urban halfway through the year. So that's going to be something that we'll have to take into account. And then what would RCT's number look like now that it's taken on Franklin Grand Isle? Is that number now going to get closer to 100 or more dollars? And so. And then a new chart for this particular year is this percent change. And so what this is doing is that this is a percent change for fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25. And what we're trying to highlight here is where we have ridership, whether it's increasing or decreasing. If it's a positive number, it's increasing. If it's a negative number, it's decreasing. What the operational costs are, again, if you see a negative, it's a decreasing operational cost. And then if it's a positive, it's an increasing operational cost. And then the overall trip cost, same scenario there. And so, altogether, we're seeing a decrease in ridership, 3.7%. Operation costs, we're seeing an increase of 3.75%, and overall trip costs up by 7.84%. And that matches really well to that slide that I showed first, where I talked about, cost per trip of 7% increase for fiscal year 25 over fiscal year 24. And so you can see our costs are increasing. We are trying to get this to level out, right? And so because we have to find the next normal for our transit service, for our transit costs, for our ridership, right? And so we still see increased costs while we're providing a lot of service. The route performance report really goes into depth into finding where we can find our underperforming routes and then analyzing those for improvements, whether it's one leg of the trip that needs to be trimmed, or maybe it's a different destination, a different time of day, or the wholesale cancellation of a trip or a service, depending on what it is. And so we've had to do that over the years as well. So the route performance report takes all the routes in Vermont and divides them up into 9 categories. The ones that GMT you'd be most interested in is 1 through 7, because it talks about your urban, where you've got small town service, demand response, microtransit. You've got some service there in Montpelier. Rural, there's a lot of rural routes that GMT operates. Commuter service, that's like the Link Express, and then tourism, like Stowe Sugarbush. And then we've included the Vanpool program and intercity analysis as well. I don't have slides for those 2 in this presentation, but they are in our performance report in case you want to see how those programs are functioning. And so this is a great set of pie charts to look at. So on the left, you have transit ridership. And I'm sorry, was there a question?
Nope, just a comment.
Oh, very good. No worries. Thank you. You have transit ridership on the left-hand pie chart. And on the right side, you see costs by those categories. And so, urban, your ridership accounts for 44% of our overall statewide ridership, but your costs only account for 21% of the actual cost of that $70 million. Okay, where you've got the large swings is in demand response, where you've got 12% of the ridership being on your demand response, and again, that's the Medicaid program, that's the O&D program. But it covers 41% of your costs, right? And again, there's millions of dollars for the Medicaid program in our cost today. And so then you can see, some other winners, right? The commuter service, it's a tourism. The tourism service is 9% of ridership, 3% of costs. Microtransit is pretty, close to, to neutral, right? 2% ridership, 4% of costs. And so you can make these, you can see where you've got, a benefit from riders and how the costs can be low based on the volume of riders. So,
Dan, we have a question.
Oh, yes, please.
Can you help square a question in here? So in an earlier slide, you showed how GMT Urban has the highest cost per hour of operation. But in this chart, what it seems to be saying is that there's a lot of value on the urban in that it's 44% of the ridership, but only 21% of the cost. What am I missing? Those seem to be contradictory to one another.
So what it's really showing you, and I can't speak to GMT's urban costs, the cost drivers for GMT Urban, are your urban contract more than anything, as far as I know, and I can't speak to it too much. But really what you're seeing there is that the urban system is able to transport way more people per hour than we are in our rural system, right? And so every transit bus in GMT's urban system is transporting 20% more than what you're seeing on the rural side, right?
So can I interrupt? And I think what I'm hearing there is there's a cost per hour, but that is not necessarily a cost per rider per hour. That's just a cost per hour. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there's Raj has a question and Alona has a question.
Please.
Yeah, thanks. I'll try to keep this brief. So just to build on that, so I understand this correctly, this would seem to fly in the face of the narrative that is sort of out there in the state that, because Chittenden County and GMT, that's where the population, what am I trying to say here? I think I get what you're saying. So GMT essentially is way more efficient than transit in the rest of the state due to the rural nature and the density. And for me, that sort of flies in the face of what we typically hear out in the community or in the legislature, where, you know, Shadid County is costing all of this. Am I thinking about this right?
You're
Is that kind of what you're getting at here?
Yes, Raj, you're absolutely right.
That was
yeah.
about as horrible a description as I could make it. I apologize, but I just want to make sure I get it.
But you've made the right connection.
Thanks, Alana.
I just following up on Paul's question. I think that the statistic that you showed earlier was the sorry. I think it was the vehicle hour statistic where GMT was in the $136 per hour, but then other transit services were more in the $90 range. So does that $136, does that include demand response?
We don't do demand response on the urban side.
Or
so
where it says GMT urban and GMT rural, and we're kind of like at the bottom of the chart.
Yeah, no worries. So on the urban side, if I may, Nick, unless you want to clarify, because this is a vehicle hour cost, right? This is your fixed route, because GMT doesn't deliver the demand response service, right?
Yeah.
So this is your
response.
Correct.
Okay. So then, but when we look at the other chart,
this one.
Yes.
Perfect.
So the first one doesn't reflect anything about who's riding the buses. It just says how much it costs to operate the bus. This is about ridership.
Efficiency, right? I think efficiency is the.
So it's almost like the
capture.
first one ought to have an additional column that is cost per rider per hour.
Yep.
Because this is just cost per hour, regardless of whether there's 100 people on the bus or nobody on the bus. I mean, the other one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have an empty bus, you still are paying the driver and the maintenance and everything, right? And so, yeah.
But when you
these are great
put
observations.
people on the bus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we're chewing through it. Keep going, Dan.
You're doing great. You're doing great. This is a lot, and I know I present every year, but it's still so. I live and breathe this, right? I know the board gets into some of the weeds, but you're not seeing it every day like we do, and so this breaks it out into the cost by those 9 categories of the service categories, right? And so statewide, that's the statewide average of all the services. You can see here the demand response service on average is costing us $53, per this is per hour, right? Sorry, let me get this right. Per passenger, right? This is like per trip cost, right? So every time we provide one trip per one passenger, this is what the cost is. And so you can see the urban side is $7.48. If you jump all the way over to the rural your rural service, your commuter service, you can see those costs as well. Microtransit at $29.30. So you can see we've got a pretty like most of our services costing under $30, right? Except for the demand response, right? And that's where we really need to start thinking about what is the volunteer pool? How can that help to drive down the cost of these services? And so and I see Andrea with her hand up. Do you want to ask a question about this slide? I'm happy to pause.
Yeah. Quick question. Was wondering, is Vanpool? I'm wondering about the sort of labor costs factored in here.
Okay.
Vanpool, we're not talking about any labor costs, right?
Correct. No labor costs. That's just what VTrans subsidizes the Vanpool program at 50% of the cost. And so what you're seeing there is our cost to operate that service, per rider. And we've got anywhere between 19 and 22 Vanpools in the state at any given time. Seasonal, it goes up, not, in the winter time, and then it drops a little bit in the summer because seasonal, resorts bring on Vanpools to help transport employees. But that is the cost for VTrans to operate it. And it's just a subsidy base. So.
Okay. And then tourism also subsidized by ski mountains and things.
A large portion of that
this
tourism.
is.
Yep. Correct.
Okay. So we're the cheapest one without an asterisk, I guess. Okay, thank you.
That's a great observation. I agree.
And Dan, sorry, in this chart on the statewide, is that a weighted average in
No.
terms of the proportion of actual trips, or is that just an average of the bars that are there?
Yep, that's just an average of the bars that are here.
Okay, so the average might actually be lower potentially based on your prior one of how much of the statewide ridership is the urban.
Yeah, you'd want to look back at, we could look at that type of number if you're interested. Also, this because demand response is included in this, right? This isn't like just fixed route. This is just, by trip cost.
Yeah,
okay.
Understood.
And so, yeah. And so that's the other thing that statewide includes. So if you wanted to get down to just what fixed route was, regardless of demand response, you could take out a couple of things like van pool and intercity bus and demand response. And so, yeah, there's some other ways to crunch the numbers. If anyone wants any of the raw data, by the way, this is all service indicator reports, right, that VTrans gets every year. And so, it's the numbers we get from the providers. So, yeah.
I think the feeling in the room is like, wow, we've been beat up so much about how expensive we are and how much, but we forget how many people we move and how efficient that is to move that many people in an urban area. And so I think we're all just digesting like, oh, we are much more efficient than the narrative that we hear all the time. That's my take
Absolutely.
on it.
Yeah.
I just want to piggyback on that I think that that's why I always use the stick factors, the fact that we have 4 of 6, because that's those are largely efficiency measures comparing us to other transit agencies. And so that's where it's like, hey, if we're in the top 12% of transit agencies in our size based on those stick factors.
Correct.
One more question in the room.
Oh, yes, please.
Dan, does this report get presented to the legislature?
It does indeed.
Look somewhat similar to this, or is it more process?
It is literally these slides, because I take Ross's presentation and I delete out the stuff that isn't GMT related. And so, yeah, he'll be presenting this. A portion of this will actually be presented on Thursday. And so the governor's address on the budget is coming out. And so VTrans will be in House and Senate in the coming weeks presenting our overview and a copy of our route performance report. So.
All right.
We love to look at the local share. And so VTrans has a goal for our system statewide to have a 20% local match against our federal dollars. You can see statewide, we are nailing it this year. And then we do like to bring out, what is GMT Urban's portion compared to the state portion. And so you can see once we remove the local portion that is GMT Urban, the local share drops down from 10.2 million down to 4.5 million, which is only 15%. So on the rural side, that really shows that VTrans has a little bit more work to do on the rural side to bring in more local funds and have transit agencies bring those forward in their grant application. But with GMT included, it covers the 20%. So again, GMT throwing more weight around than what people usually give you credit for should be the takeaway as well. And local funds here do include your fares.
So the inverse of this, Dan, is that the third pie chart would be that GMT is exceeding the state target.
Yep.
By something, reasonably substantive there. Mm-hmm. By 25 to 30%, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going.
Now's where the bad news begins. So we do analyze all of our routes to look at underperforming services. And this is cost, right? We really are looking at the cost per passenger on these services, okay? And so what we look at is that the cost at individual route level and then the ridership of that route. And then we calculate whether the route is acceptable or not. And that acceptable is based on where you take the class average of the route, and then you calculate, 1.5 times the average, and then up and down. And so to get where your benchmarks are, the GMT does have 4 routes on this service that chart that did fall into underperforming services. You've had one on this list for 10 years, which is the Williston Essex route. And then the rest of them are all on your rural side. And then you've got, that's the city commuter there under rural. And then you've got 2 down below, 1 demand response. Your GMT rural demand response costs are, you will be shocked. We were when we saw it. And then the Valley Floor also as a tourism route is not achieving our service indicators because, and that's been doing it for many years. And that one in particular is because it's really more of a commuter service than it is actually a seasonal route. And so we'll show that in a minute as well. So, so again, you take the class average and we add a multiplier to determine what is acceptable. And then same with the successful. You can see here, all of your routes except for the Williston Essex are falling within inside of the acceptable category. And oh, just one small note, just because GMT is the only one that shows this difference, the gray portion of this chart where you see the hatched blue, I don't know how well it's showing at your end compared to the solid blue. The hatched blue is the cost of the service before fares. So as soon as you include the fare cost that you've collected from your riders, it then drops down to the solid blue bar, just in case there's any questions about that. So,
and just to remind the board members that the Williston Essex line was changed in June, and this is data from fiscal year 25. So this is the economic performance of the old route, not the new route.
That is true. That is true. And so the new route, because you did it in June, you'll have a full fiscal year to look at from VTrans coming up for fiscal year 26. And fortunately, the route performance report takes 3 to 6 months to actually create after the fiscal year closes. So VTrans gets a draft as early as sometimes November of that same year, but it's always a little outdated. And then Pine Street, and so it's very close.
Let me interrupt. Chris wanted to add
I was
something.
just add context to the Pine Street.
Oh, okay.
That was the only one that's really close to the acceptable or going over the acceptable threshold. So during this current fiscal year that it's being reported, that was when we had a lot of the construction impacts for the Champlain Parkway around there, and for some portions of this route, it wasn't even operating on Pine Street; it was operating on Shelburne Road. So that certainly was going to impact the ridership on that, and we've seen the ridership as construction has subdued. We've seen ridership increase on Pine Street.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Again, we'll try to stop interrupting you as we move forward.
It's fine. And so I am definitely going to make you late on your agenda, though.
We will blame you.
But I mean, I do just want to highlight, you have some in GMT, you do have some very successful routes, right? The Essex Junction route, the Neighborhood Special, your North Avenue, and your Williston route are all performing, very, very efficiently, and very successfully as far as VTrans's metrics are concerned. And so if you're doing great service, right? So, which is why some of the cuts you talk about are probably so hard, right, to have that conversation, because you're providing excellent service, right? And all of the benchmarks are being achieved. And so, yeah. Again, look for the blue lines on all of these bar charts. And so the only thing that you'll see here is that because GMT Urban is the only system that's taking fares right now, all the grays compared to the hatching compared to the solid will now match up perfectly. And so The city commuter route is really that other underperforming route that has come forward. GMT will not be operating that route in fiscal year 27. So this is really more of a forward-looking conversation that we probably have to have with Tri-Valley Transit. And by the way, it's right at the threshold, right? I mean, we're talking like pennies above that line, considered acceptable. That city commuter route for many years has been, achieving all the metrics. And so what the cause of there is, I'm not sure, but I'm sure if Chris, you've had any comments on it, please share. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Yeah, the only comment I would add for the city commuter is at the end of fiscal year 24 and the beginning of fiscal year 25 is when we started to restore service on the city commuter. For a lot of the pandemic, we only had 60-minute service instead of 30-minute service. And so it was during this fiscal year that we slowly restored that service back due to staffing.
Yeah, and then perhaps ridership was low during that restoration phase, and then it returned. And I know I've been on the bus for city commuter. The 4 o'clock out of Barrie, oh my goodness, that bus is packed. And then when you add a wheelchair, then your standees are on the bus. I mean, and it's a cutaway, right? So you're talking like 18 to 20 people, is the max. And so it's pretty, it seems like a productive route from what I've seen as a rider. So demand response, slides as we're looking at here, you can see your GMT rural demand response costs, very high, and it is, it achieved, the distinction of not falling inside the acceptable range at VTrans for the first year ever. And so, so what's this mean? GMT is providing a lot of demand response trip at very high costs, unfortunately. And that gray dot is the number of volunteers that you're utilizing. You're right at 20% of the trips that you provide are with volunteers. Your partners across the state have closer to 30 or 40% of the trips being provided by volunteers, right? So we're going to need to get GMT up to that level. I know this is hard to present as GMT rural service is sort of going away, but VTransit's been putting a lot of fundamental, money into the rural grants, including GMTs, and giving you additional state money for volunteer recruitments. And so we really hope some of the base, framework is developed as GMT, hands over service to RCT and TVT on the volunteer side to boost that number, right? And so, and VTrans got special money from the legislature to the tune of $600,000 to help with that volunteer recruitment. And that was distributed throughout the state, GMT receiving $80,000 of that money as well. And so there's lots of money being thrown at the volunteer, angle here. And so, but yeah, just something that we're going to be watchful of as we transfer these services. And we look forward to what 26 costs are looking like. And so we expect they're going to be high again. So. Any questions about demand response or volunteers?
No, and I do think we need to pick up the pace just a little bit. We'll try to not interrupt.
No worries. And I only have like 2 or 3 slides left. Microtransit, what's the big takeaway? GMT, you're doing great. Lowest cost microtransit provider in fiscal year 25. Good job to Chris and Jamie for all that hard work on the microtransit.
They just high-fived in the room. You didn't get to see that. Okay, continue.
Perfect. Tourism, again, you guys are doing great on tourism. You have a lot of support in Stowe and in Sugarbush. The Valley floor, that has been a chronic problem for years and years and years. And it might just be a route that we have to pay a little bit more for, right? And so is sometimes what ends up happening, right? If the community doesn't want to cut it, if the ski resort really wants it, and as long as they're paying the money to operate it, what's our role might be just to say, great, we know it's going to always be costing, more than what is acceptable. So. No concerns on your commuter side. I do want to just say that you do have 2 very successful commuter routes in 25, that Richford commuter and your Montpelier Express, both successful routes. But overall, your cost per passenger for your commuter service is really well, in line with the state. So, and that's my last slide. I'm gonna stop sharing here.
Thanks, Dan. I
Thank
think
you.
that's super interesting. And for the first time, it was kind of a kick in the seat of a reminder of how efficient and how well we do. And my concern is as we continue to have to cut routes, we're going to push more people onto demand response, OND, and so on and so forth as we lose access to that 3/4 mile from routes. Ilona, and then Andrea, and then I'm going to push us along.
Thank you, Dan. It's super, super helpful. I feel like because this is going to the legislature, I have an ask for you and Ross, because first impressions are so important. And I know our legislature is super smart and dedicated. I think Paul's suggestion of adding some type of metric next to the vehicle miles traveled about the ridership efficiency to build that chart out a tiny bit would just be helpful, because that is the first sort of cross-state metric that they would see. So that would be nice. And I don't know if you're going to include the GMT specific routes, but there were a lot of routes which between FY25 and FY26 changed, if there was a way to asterisk those, if those are being shown to the legislature, so that they understand that all transit agencies are working to address these.
Yeah, and to that last point, yes, we do an asterisk, where we try to highlight, like the Jefferson commuter. I don't know if you noticed it. It was still in our chart because that was still operating in fiscal year 25. Same with, RCT has a route that ended in 25 as well. So there's a lot of asterisks to the data because some routes were canceled halfway through the year. And so, but thank you for all that comments. That's great. I'll bring it forward to Ross so we can update the slides. So thank you.
Okay, final word.
That was my comment too. Just I would love some reflection of that to the sort of comments that we were all making. I would love some like front loaded acknowledgement that our service is very efficient, so that you don't see the cost per hour and say, whoa, what are they doing? So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I will make sure Ross knows and pass it forward. Appreciate this.
No, we appreciate this, Dan. It's really a great reminder and summary for us. And while we're talking about legislative things, right, as this is going to the legislature, we certainly have conversation about legislature on our agenda right now.
Thank you, Amy. And so earlier today, we talked a bit about the OND situation, and that really has sort of taken up some of the House and Senate committee time so far during the session. I think that will probably wrap up today, or at least I'm hoping that will wrap up today. Because the big news for the committees, which people I'm sure have seen in the newspapers or from our previous discussions, is just the T-fund gap with the transportation fund, coming up. I think it was $33 million short to what the need is, and how that would be addressed. I do know that there's discussion about the potential of local options tax for diesel and gas, and that may be a way to help bolster the T-fund, and whether that is directed to public transit or just goes to the T-fund itself, I think we need to wait and see. The things that I want to comment on, really, I want to talk about how good a partnership it's been with the Necrason Group since we started them, because one of the things that I've seen is that, for example, last week when the OND issue was being discussed in House Transportation, we saw the chair of that committee, Matt Walker, say very positive comments in defense of GMT. And I think that is a relationship that, hasn't always been super positive with Representative Walker, and to see him making statements that he has confidence in us is certainly very helpful. Similarly, hearing that the leadership of the Senate Transportation Committee is seeing us in a positive light, I think is helping to sort of get past some of the, past negative, press about GMT. Which gets us to one of the things that I was very appreciative of Jim Moulton, the executive director for Tri-Valley Transit. When he was asked last week about his biggest surprise of the rural transfer, his response was that considering the press that he had read about GMT, then starting to work with GMT and seeing how good GMT was doing, I think that he was surprised that, that the press about GMT doesn't match the reality that we do good work. And so it was really helpful that that was presented. So I think that this is to say, the legislature has very difficult times ahead with rationing out the limited fiscal resources. But I'm happy to report that it seems that those committees are more positive about GMT than it perhaps has been in the past. On Thursday, we'll get the governor's budget, as we heard from Dan. Hopefully, it looks like what has been projected to us, and then that would bring us in alignment with the administration for the second year in a row. And I think that is helpful for us with the committees. And then the last thing that I want to mention when it comes to the legislature is I'm really happy that we're seeing a joint hearing this week. So the Senate Transportation Committee and the Senate Health and Welfare Committee are going to be jointly taking testimony on the impacts of public transit reductions on health and welfare goals. And so one of my goals at the State House has been connecting beyond the Transportation Committee so that those committees that are trying to get people to work, because of they're working for economic development, those committees focused on healthcare, those committees focused on human services, see that public transit is critical to their goals. And so I see it as a very positive sign that they're having this joint meeting on Wednesday, or joint hearing on Wednesday, not Wednesday, Friday.
This Friday, next Friday?
This Friday. Yep. And it'll be in room 11 Friday morning. So hopefully there'll be a good crowd.
So I just want to follow up on a couple things. Has there been any movement on the VPTA concept of the package delivery?
I have not seen any, but they also really haven't gotten into that level of testimony yet. When you look at the agendas, it's mostly the sort of annual reintroductions of the agency and stuff. So they haven't really dove into much topics other than the O&D issue, just because it was so timely.
Okay. My other question is, as we, as community members or professionals, are out and about bumping into our senators and representatives, it would be great if Nick Grayson could help with some talking points that we can use. I know that I'm going to Williston's legislative breakfast in February, which feels like a long way away, but it's only 2 weeks, maybe. But I think the aha moment that we all continue to have of like, we know we're here because we're committed to the service and we know we could do a good job, but to see it as the most efficient and most cost effective, right, in the state, those are our surprises both to us, but to our lawmakers who continue maybe to think that we operate empty buses. Even just reminding them that we're moving over 2 million people every year helps to reframe the conversation. So if we could have some just really brief talking points about our efficiency and our cost effectiveness, that would be really, really helpful, I think, for reframing the conversation.
Absolutely, and definitely want to include in that what we heard from Paul too, which is that the combination of local and fares, shows that we're, that we're raising a lot of money on the ground, compared to our peers.
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions on this? Chapin, you've been kind of our legislative champion, of late. Do you have you want to weigh in any way, shape, or form?
Thanks, Amy. I think your talking point idea is great. Clayton, so pleased to hear that Necrason is really helping us at the State House, and want to hear from you how we can help. Moving forward, I think, it sounds like there's no specific proposals here, but VPTA and the package delivery fee may be a door opening to have the structural funding gap unpacked in front of the transportation committees. Let us know how we can help, and thanks.
Thank you. I definitely think that I'm hoping that we'll have clarity in the next week or two about what the chairs of those committees are thinking of in terms of revenue generation from a diesel and gas tax. So I think between the package delivery fee and the local option tax there, that we have two items that would be very good for us.
All right, we're gonna move on. You can continue to hold the floor. You can talk about your interim manager report.
And so we'll do an abbreviated version. I sent a message, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, about the challenges that we're having with our electric buses. And that specifically the 5 New Flyers, which had been operating wonderfully, has had to have some of their settings changed. Henry, I know that you had a question to me about when New Flyer will be moving to solid state batteries, and I can tell you, I don't believe that they will be moving to solid state batteries prior to our existing contract with them ending. This does mean that we'll be getting 6 more buses that will have solid state batteries. They will not be the batteries that are currently recalled, and hopefully that they will do better. I think that the thing that really is important for the board to know here is that how close we are to not being able to meet rollout with having 5 of our newest buses suddenly not available to us. That there have been times when we literally would have to cancel service if one more bus broke down. With about 1/3 of our fleet already exceeding the years and miles, that's going to be a real challenge for us. And that is perhaps the biggest barrier for us addressing the concerns that we had about the number 11. That right now we would not be able to return front door service on the number 11 with the buses that we have, unless we cut service elsewhere. I want to give a shout out. Oh, yeah.
Before you leave that, Clayton, it's an operational question, not a board question, but is there some contingency plan / like mutual aid for if you're operating that thin, what happens? Because it's at least a couple, 3 months before we're above whatever the temperature was.
What happens is that we start somewhat randomly dropping service, is the unfortunate reality. We're not going to be able to flex vehicles from our rural fleet simply because most of those vehicles aren't going to meet our size needs. And we will, when the seasonal service ends at the end of March and April, we'll also have relief. So our most narrow, thin margins will be from now until April.
And Chapin's question in the chat
I
was.
got a question. I can't find the raise hand. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Henry.
Yep.
I've been you need to terminate the contract. Okay, buying 5 more buses, which are basically door stops the day you bought them, and they're scrap metal. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the contract, it needs to be terminated because these things are just no good, and the current buses should be sold to someplace down south where they have some value. And if we had to spend VW money, well, it can be what you get from setting them and selling them. can be set aside when a reasonable bus comes in the future. To obey it. But that's getting 5 more of these pieces of junk or so is just wrong.
I'm not eager for having more buses taking up parking spots in our lot that are never used. I can tell you the problem is that if we cancel our next order, we will be on the hook for the multi-million-dollar payment cancellation. And we will not get FTA funds to pay for the cancellation.
Why are you on the hook? The buses aren't what they promised. Okay, I don't know your contract. I don't know if you look, but no, they promised you a bus that could be actually used. Okay, and these can't be used. Okay, so therefore, look at you. There's got to be an out clause in that or so when they are delivering crap when that is not what you wanted to buy. There has to be an out clause on that.
I think that these agreements were crafted very carefully for an emerging technology to protect the vendor. And so I think that it will be very hard for us to change course, but we are having our legal counsel give us the best course of action. There's multiple years left of our electric bus grant, and so the ones that we know that we're definitely on the hook for are the ones that we already submitted the purchase orders for. And so beyond that, we will have greater flexibility, I think, in determining whether we order or not. And hopefully by then that they're offering a product that won't be a large paperweight.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm just curious if Green Mountain Transit does participate in the mutual aid program or it seems like there are probably a lot of organizations in Vermont are trying out a lot of new technology. And if there's a support system available for Green Mountain Transit as they work through these types of challenges.
There is not. And so I think that we are thinking about example, renting some buses to Tri-Valley Transit to help them with their vehicle crisis, but that's going to be small vehicles from our rural fleet there. The issue is that there's not a whole lot of large city buses that are operating, and that's going to be the challenge. And we don't have partnerships with anyone outside the state. I think that the question about renting a bus that I saw from Chapin, that's something that we are going to try to explore, but I don't think that we're going to have much luck with getting something that we would be able to deploy with our fare boxes and all of the technology. It's going to be a difficult thing to do. But certainly, if it's the choice between no service or running a bus that we don't own that doesn't collect fares, that may be a choice that we need to look at.
Or a garage mutual aid.
So we have in the past sometimes outsourced maintenance. It's extremely expensive, and their ability to absorb our workload is also limited. So I don't necessarily see that as a pathway that's going to. It may help nibble around the edges, but I don't think that it will magically make our old buses more reliable.
So I'm going to push through this one because it is a huge bummer, but I think the message from the board to staff is continue to be as creative as possible to work through this craziness. I know we're not alone in having challenges with new technology, specifically in buses. I know the Champlain Valley School District's having trouble with their electric buses also. So if anybody has creative ideas on the side, please send them along. I know, folks here are super creative and will continue to do so.
And I know that South Burlington's city manager has often talked about the redundancy of having, the Premier service, the Bobcat service, the Champlain service, the GMT service, and that, perhaps all of this would be better if it were, consolidated, and I can't disagree with that. And, maybe a future maybe the scarcity will start forcing some of those discussions. I do want to give a shout out to Tim again. Tim, did we wrap up the triennial review with that last submission, or is it done now?
Well.
Oh, okay, all right.
No, so we did wrap up anything that, you know, had a due date. So everything at this point, Chris, thank you for the updated policy. They have just some slight changes in the public meeting policy, which has been addressed. Other than that, we still have a couple of DBE, disadvantaged business enterprises, and we asked for an extension on that until 6/20/2026. I mean 6/30/2026. I'm working with the FTA on that right now. I did ask them some clarifying questions due to the changes in the guidelines under the current administration. Working on that. They asked me to submit some additional questions to the civil rights section at the FTA to see if in fact they might adjust what our corrective actions might be for those two additional findings.
Roger that.
But other than that, everything else is good to go.
Well, great. Thank you for getting there. I'd hope that we'd been done, but we'll be done later.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, everything else is minor. And so I'm going to turn it back over to you.
I'm gonna take it back. We have committee reports and discussions. I will say the leadership committee met last week. I don't know, time moves too fast. For me, we primarily talked about O&D, conversation that we had, and leadership, committee structure and that kind of stuff. So nothing too surprising, nothing that we haven't discussed today. Finance?
Finance did not meet, but we will be now getting our second quarterly reports and the audit. So they'll be coming up.
Okay, and I shut my computer, but that was done, because we have discussed committee membership. Hold your horses. Hold them for a long time.
Does anyone have any commissioner comments while Amy's looking?
There are none. My computer and I don't always agree with things. Okay, here we go. So we did look at committee assignments. I will say that Susan is moving quickly on the visioning committee. And on that committee, we have Susan as chair. We have Chapin, Bethany, Ilona, John, and Jamie, and Chris are going to be staff. Did I make that up? No, that's correct. And so Susan's trying to get the first meeting scheduled to get moving. I always appreciate her efficiency, of which I do not have. Finance committee is still Paul. We have Austin, Paul C, and Andrea joining that committee. And I'll let you and team, and obviously Nick, work on if the meeting time needs to change or anything. The service committee, I have no chair identified yet, which just means I need to identify someone. But we have Charlene, Ilona, Henry, myself, and Chapin. I didn't know if that was a committee you wanted to join when Vision was done. So I kind of put you in as a question mark.
Yeah, however, if that's the best place for me after, or governance, wherever.
Yeah, governance is light at the moment. Governance has Bethany and Judy wanted to be on governance also, but it realized I didn't have responses from Raj and no, I do have Henry, Raj, and any alternates who wanted to join. So governance is a little light, but probably won't get going until visioning is over anyway. We may have some board members move from one to the other. So we just need a service chair, and then we will get those meetings up and going. And I just want to make the comment that, you know, for the past year, our committees have been year and a half, except for finance and leadership, have been quite sporadic. And so I hope that we can make a commitment to make sure that we have quorum in these committee meetings. For nobody likes to show up when there's no quorum. It's no fun and it doesn't work very well.
And I would be happy to just facilitate the meetings as a voting member, if there's a difficulty in finding a chair. for
I
that.
don't think there's difficulty. I think I just haven't said, will you person be chair? And so perhaps that could be my commitment today to approach some person and ask them to be chair. Or if someone is itching and wants to do that for the service committee, let me know.
One of the things I was thinking is if our dear friend like Chapin said, man, I would love to chair the service committee when the vision committee is done, then I could kind of keep the seat warm while he's doing his vision work.
He's smiling.
He didn't say no.
He's a nice person.
Happy to fill in if that's the best way I can be helpful. Count me in.
Perfect. And so that is the update on committees. I think leadership is set in stone, at least until July, when we all shuffle around. And so that's that. Any other commissioner comments? I'll just make one, because you guys keep letting me sit here and talk. Oftentimes I leave here thinking, ooh, there's a lot of trouble, or ooh, things are hard. Today I leave here thinking we do a kick-ass job at what we do, with lots of great, excuse my language, with lots of great creative thinking, with lots of planning, with lots of staff who are working their butts off every day out in the bus, under the bus. I don't know how mechanics work, but doing the work that move people around efficiently. And I think Dan's report really highlights how efficient and cost effective we are. And as we continue to try to look for efficiencies, I think for the state, what's going to happen is if we remove more routes or spaces, that more of that push to that inefficient demand response will happen. And I think we have to make sure that we're keeping that part of the conversation. As much as GMT can do what it does really well, then the state benefits on its bottom line. So I look forward to continuing this conversation, to talking with my lawmakers in the next couple of weeks, whether they're through work or through Williston. And I encourage you all to make sure you're having those conversations as well about how amazing this service is, and kind of renews my excitement for being in this space. That's it, period.
Thank you for leading us.
So anyway, and if no further comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. That was not very good.
It was, Paul said it wasn't good, but I'm guessing there's no opposed or abstentions. And thank you very much.
That's why.
Have a good end of the month.
Thank you, Amy. Stay warm.
Thank you. You too, Cam.
Bye.